Ah, the new year. A time for change, a time for new beginnings, and a time for me to actually talk about a series of games that I've actively distanced myself for ages. Five Nights at Freddy's has always been a thing on the internet for a good chunk of the past decade. Having humble beginnings and then blowing up into a franchise has actively annoyed the living hell out of me for the last few years, too. But much like the new year, I want to give something a chance before it stabs me in the back, takes my wallet, and leaves me with crippling depression. So with that in mind, we have Security Breach, the latest in the FNAF series, and honestly probably one of the more visually fun games I've seen in a while. And considering that it has the departure in gameplay from the original FNAF, I figure why in the hell not and give it a shot. So, what are my thoughts? Well, I still kinda got that knife in my back. Now, don't take that to mean I think this game is straight up bad, mind you, but it left me with some odd questions and concerns. And I'm not a huge FNAF fan, so I need to remind you all that I'm coming into this with an open mind. Especially since I happen to be a lover of the neon 80s/90s style that the game has going for it. Heck, it was probably the reason that drew me into actually wanting to play this game and actually giving it a fair shake. So, what is this game about? You are Gregory, a little kid who somehow ended up in the chest cavity of Glamrock Freddy and you need to escape the Pizzaplex. How did you get in there? Why are you in here? Were you kidnapped? Were you some kid who snuck into the Pizzaplex? All good questions that the game promptly responds with, "Shut the hell up and take this watch." Now, I'm not opposed to having cold openings like this in games, but that usually comes with a caveat that we actually get answers to those questions. And to the game's credit, it does answer one of those questions, kinda, I think. You really gotta make a few leaps in logic and connect the four squares in order to do that, and then get sued by Tom Hanks for referring to the Da Vinci Code if you want to figure out this kind of lore. I am well aware that one of the major appeals of FNAF is its hidden story and lore that you have to actively search for. I get enough of Matt Pat's dumb theories clogging up my recommendations and tell me that much at least. But considering that the previous games weren't set in an open world setting like this, Scott Cawthon had to compress the lore and find fun ways to incorporate it into a semi-limited gameplay. I don't know, I was just expecting there to be some kind of explanation, especially since you're making the player character into an actual character this time around instead of some faceless security guard who for some reason wants to remain in the pizza joint with killer furries. Something akin to maybe why Gregory was there, maybe some foreshadowing dialogue before the game began, but nah, let's just throw the players in with nothing to explain this. I'm honestly kind of disappointed that we don't get a lot of backstory for Gregory, save for that he's homeless, which begs the question of how and why he got into the Pizzaplex in the first place. I'm trying not to get into spoiler territories right now, but I honestly have to say that the endings of the game were kinda confusing. They don't last long, they're done in this weird comic book style-esque presentation that doesn't really match up with the rest of the game, and while I do like that style, most of them aren't even voiced, and that really detracts from a game that up until this point had actual good voice acting, and it should have been used to help solidify the endings presentations. Okay, so now I get into a bit of spoiler territory. So I'll put a timestamp on the screen, so if you don't want to see them, either just hit that part of the chapters or scroll towards that time. And to make it clear, I am not an expert on FNAF lore or history, so if I get something wrong, I apologize in advance. Alright, so for those who are here, William Afton, one of the most prominent characters in the entire series, barely has a role in this game. Now, for people like me who aren't too deep into FNAF lore and are getting into this game, that's kinda bad. I understand wanting to be true to the lore and including this sort of thing, but there's obviously people who will come to this game without the greatest knowledge or understanding of the crazy lore the series has. Doesn't help that there wasn't a lot in the game that really hinted at him. Then again, I'm a dumbass YouTuber, and my dumbass YouTuber brain working overtime, I'm willing to bet that maybe I missed something. But the story came off as incredibly vague to me, and I get it, that's FNAF. People are going to hyperanalyze even the smallest and tiniest details in order to explain things. I know for a fact that MatPat obsessed over a lamp in one of his many theory videos, but this really didn't catch my attention or pique my curiosity like I was hoping it would. Okay. Spoilers over. Now, while the story is pretty weak, I can forgive a weak story if the characters are at least interesting, funny, or compelling. And, well, unfortunately, that's not really the case for the most part. Sure, Glamrock Freddy is pretty awesome, and I know the internet has pretty much solidified him as dad material.
I know it will be hard for you to be sus, but I know you can do it, Gregory.
And for good reason, as the interactions in the game with him are pretty interesting. Like when you visit a part of the Pizzaplex that apparently Glamrock Bonnie was a part of, Freddy expresses that he misses his old friend, and you learn later that Monty ripped Bonnie apart.
Fuck you!
Or Freddy's existential crisis of seeing the endoskeleton bots in the basement where he questions his own existence and identity. I wasn't expecting the 80s robot bear to be an interesting character. Huh. What's this? Funtime Freddy shares the same voice actor as Diavolo!
In a moment, we will find out if I'm prepared to vanquish my past.
We really only grow once we've conquered our phantoms, wouldn't you say?
Sadly, that's pretty much the only good thing I can say about the characters. Gregory, the player character, in addition to not having anything really to know about the kid, really came off as detestable to me. Why? Because when you get to the point where you have to kill the other animatronics and rip out portions of them to install into Freddy, Gregory then lies to Freddy about his friends' demise.
These are Roxy's eyes?
Well, yeah. There was an accident in the raceway.
Get out of the way!
Oh.
There was an accident in the raceway.
You can never control the consequences if you speed.
I kind of felt bad for the animatronics more than the actual kid, who lied to the robot who has been nothing but helpful to him to survive this point. Speaking of the other animatronics, they don't really have a lot of personality to them, with the exception of Roxy, the wolf robot that, as I'm typing this, probably has a few gigabytes of porn on the internet.
I am the best. I am the best.
Don't mind her. She has green hair and pronouns.
She comes off as confident and egotistical, but later in the game you see her actually crying and downing herself as she can't catch Gregory. Now, my biggest issue is that when you enter Roxy's room and she's crying while you're inside Freddy, she'll actually chastise Freddy in order for him to get out of her room. And he's like, I'm going. I actually really like that, as it shows the relationship between the animatronics to a very small degree. And that's the problem. There should have been more interactions between the animatronics. I mean, why not? You've got this huge mall with a ton of interesting locations within it, why not have some scripted events where the animatronics bump into each other and actually interact? There's a ton of rooms that don't really have anything in them, so why not? Why not have interactions with the animatronics and Freddy when you're inside him? There was a lot of potential with not only the expansive world map, but also with the characters that would have benefited from having smaller pieces of dialogue like this between the characters. And yeah, there's a lot of rooms you can explore, but they don't really offer anything rewarding to your exploration, say for a small item or not. Which is a shame because I really do love the Pizzaplex. Graphically, this game is top notch. It looks great and has an aesthetic that's visually vibrant and eye-catching. I can't really complain about the game and how it looks. And that's a good thing, especially when you consider there's a lot of minor details that didn't really need to be put into these areas but still got put in. I kinda wish there was a mode where you could walk around the Pizzaplex and just see what the whole world is like, because I love the level design of this place. In addition, the animatronics look really good, like insanely good. They're colorful, imaginative, and really fit the aesthetic that the game is going for. They're probably the most appealing animatronics I like so far of the FNAF series, even though the level of technology is a little confusing in this place. However, then you got the human characters like Vanessa, Security Guard, and Gregory. Basically, all the humans aren't really that appealing. Hell, Vanessa, whenever she caught me with her jump scare, made me think I was about to enter the Andromeda dimension, and who thought this was even a proper jump scare? White women do not scare me! Performance, on the other hand, was a mixed bag. I have a dedicated gaming PC. While it didn't actively interfere with the gameplay, there was a fair bit of stuttering going on, and when I tried to record footage for the game, it really slowed down my gameplay in PC to a near crawl. That's kind of why I'm using other people's footage right now. What? I'm on a budget here! Speaking of gameplay, I suppose we should talk about that now, and I want to get this out of the way immediately. The gameplay reminded me of Alien Isolation, where you had little to no defenses against a chaser, you had to hide and outmaneuver him with limited stamina. Eventually you get some paltry defenses against the animatronics, but they have a cooldown period or have limited ammo.
What the hell is that? You know what it is, bitch. Bang!
Not inherently a bad thing, mind you. Hell, I prefer this over Alien Isolation since I prefer the colorful designs of the animatronics over the xenomorph as well as the setting. Especially when the animatronics slowly get more and more damage, adds to their visual creepiness. What I do take issue with is the fact the entire game is practically nothing more than a bunch of fetch quests all jumbled up into a single game. Now, I don't have a problem with there being a fetch quest or two, but when it's the majority of your game, it kinda gets on my nerves. It gets tedious and boring really quickly, even more so when you've got teleporting animatronics. Oh yeah, the animatronics teleport. Whenever you enter a new room, BAM! Animatronic. When one of the annoying staff bots sees you or grabs you, BAM! Animatronic teleports to you. Gee, thanks, game. Thank you so much.
Pizza time.
And what sucks more is that dying in this game is extremely bad, and that's due to the saving system. Another factor that FNAF seems to have taken from Alien Isolation is the save stations that are spaced out quite a bit. They tend to be a bit too infrequent, so if you get past a tough section and you get caught by one of the animatronics, oops, gotta do all that over again. I know it sounds like I'm complaining about dying, and maybe I just suck at this game. That's totally a thing that can be possible here, and I'm willing to admit that. When you go online, you can see there are plenty of other people complaining about the save system, so I don't think I'm the only one who has issues with this system. It's especially bad when you're trying to get to the actual good ending of the game, as it opens up new areas for you to explore, yet disables all the save points. And I'm like, what? What would make you think that was a good idea? You've got an expansive world here, and not having the ability to save your game when you just now open up new areas is extremely counterproductive and will make players have to go through everything multiple times if they just make one mistake and get caught. And that's really detrimental to a horror game, because here's the thing about death in video games. I'm of the mind that just because you revive in a game, that doesn't automatically make the horror aspect diminish. What does negatively impact it is the repetitive nature. If you're forced to go through the same thing again and again, you're not going to be scared, and that includes being chased by the animatronics. Seldom are things scary the second time around, even more so when it's the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 20th time you're dealing with this stuff. And this is coming from the guy who was afraid of playing Ocarina of Time because the big scary one-eyed spider boss at the beginning got me freaked out. So take that into consideration for whatever you want. The more the player experiences something, the less scary it becomes because the player becomes more and more familiar with the thing that killed it. If I'm progressing to the end and I take a wrong turn and run into Roxy who wants to punish me for making a crack about her green hair, I'm gonna get pissed off the game because it'll force me to do everything I just did up until that point. Kinda reminds me of Outlast. It's a game where I have a lot of problems with, but at the very least, the game has an auto-save system, so if I die, at the very least, I'm not losing a ton of progress. And I need to make it clear, I'm not the biggest fan of Outlast. Next is the quote-unquote boss fights. I'm gonna be honest here, these are not boss fights. The only one that even comes close to being one is Monty, and that's mainly because you have to manage keeping distance from the gator and shooting balls into a huge bucket to take him down. Otherwise, it's just push a button and smash the animatronic. These do not come off as boss fights. Calling them boss fights is kind of an insult to the actual boss fights in gaming. Kraid, Metroid Dread, Wolf, Metal Gear Rising, the Gym Leaders, Pokemon. These are boss fights. Boss fights are tests of skill which force the player to use whatever skills they have acquired throughout the gameplay up until this point and see how well they can work with the mechanics as well as find loopholes in order to beat these bosses. The animatronics really don't come off this way to me. Hell, probably the worst boss fight is against the daycare attendant, Sun and Moon here. While an interesting concept, it fails in its execution, since for those not in the know, in order to beat Moon, you need to turn on 5 generators. Where are these generators? Good luck if you actually don't know when playing this the first time. I read online before you actually continue on with this section, you should take the time before you continue the daycare segment to look for the location of the generators. But most people who get into that segment aren't going to know what to do unless they spoiled the game ahead of themselves or got information beforehand from other people. Throw in the fact that this segment is at the start of a game and you've got yourself an issue where you're putting players in an endurance run to find these generators that are hard to find with no chance to save in between. It's frustrating, it's annoying, and it's what almost made me quit the game too.
Children must be punished.
And finally, we gotta talk about the bugs. I would say I'm surprised that a game like this has this many bugs, especially when it first came out, but it's a sad state of affairs that nowadays tons of games in the gaming industry are now being released as buggy messes to the public. It's a trend that really needs to die, and I'm getting sick of seeing it in a ton of games. Some of the bugs I've experienced and have seen others experience are Freddy disappearing in the elevators, Freddy won't appear when called, getting stuck in places you're not meant to be, and some players having soft and hard locks, meaning their progress is removed. And that's just some of the bugs I've seen. Don't get me wrong, cosmetically the game itself is really well done. I love the interactions between Freddy and Gregory, even if Gregory pissed me off by lying to Freddy. But those are really the polish on the game, which unfortunately when you polish a rusty gear, it's still gonna be rusty. Now, I understand that the last few years have been tough for game designers, most notably Steel Wool, and I'm not without sympathy, especially with the bullshit that Scott Cawthorne had to deal with concerning the drama that was leading him to be cancelled and inevitably retiring from the franchise. I don't want to get into that drama since it's not the point of this video and I really don't want to be bashed in the fucking head with a carton of strawberry milk, but Steel Wool put out a product that I really can't support. I understand that there was probably a lot of crunch involved. The number of assets in this game and the materials that went into it are astounding, but if the end product is lacking, then I kinda had to be the bad guy here. This game should have had more time to be processed, to have the bugs ironed out, and to really have put more into it. But knowing the fanbase and considering the positive ratio on Steam, I doubt there will be much done to this. Granted, considering that Markiplier is getting pissed at the game himself.
Please, give me in, Freddy! Freddy, you bitch! Freddy!
Who knows? I sure as hell don't. But before I go, I have one more thing I have to say. If you made it to this point in the video, then I thank you for at least hearing me out. And I'm well aware that this opinion that I'm holding is probably in the minority, and my intent isn't to make you feel bad for liking this game. However, if you sat through this video, it's because of two reasons. One, you really like my character art, which, I know, people love him too. Thank you very much. Or two, and more likely, it's because you actually care about the games you play, and the criticism that surrounds them too. And if that second part is the real reason you're not simping for my character, then you have to admit to yourself that not every game you play is great. You need to recognize the faults and problems in not only the games you dislike, but the games you like, or want to like. I really wanted to like Security Breach. I felt it was the game that could actually turn me into a fan of the series and not just be an outside observer. And while there are aspects that I do really like about this game, it ultimately pushed me away. I'm not saying it's a terrible game, but it's not one that I would actively return to or really seek out more information about. Unless it was a fan art about Roxy, because holy shit. I don't typically go into my reviews wanting to actively hate something that I'm talking about, even for games that I honestly straight up hated in the past. I usually go into a game hoping that it's good, because I really appreciate developers. They put their time, creativity, and effort into it. And if it's something like this, then I feel bad about this for not liking it. It's just that this time, it wasn't good. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. My experience wasn't completely hampered, but it was something that really didn't light the world on fire for me. I hope that Steel Wool can learn from this and improve, because artistically they managed to hit the nail on the head. It's just the gameplay side that really hurt this game, along with a lack of polish on the gameplay as well. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go delete my internet search history. Bye bye!
You can't hide forever.